Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And I hope everybody's joining us back after Thanksgiving. They didn't, eat themselves to death. I don't mean eating too much. I mean literally eating yourself. You know, gnawing on your arms.
Yeah, that's what I did. I had to work the day before, the day of, and the day after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's
we
bullshit.
we didn't do anything. I think we had maybe DiGiorno. It's the first time I've never not done a Thanksgiving dinner in some form, and I eat like shit anyway, so a holiday dedicated to that doesn't mean much, but
yeah,
it was weird.
I mean, it does. We ended up, I just cooked little Cornish hens. If there's tiny chickens, if you're not familiar with them,
they're fun because they make you feel like a warlord.
Yeah, there's zero meat on them, but that's why I got 2 for $6. But
everybody gets their own chicken. That's what you do that for.
And they look just like miniature turkeys, so you still get the feel of Thanksgiving. And we did the stuffing and mashed potatoes. And
you cover it all in gravy anyway, so
you should. I can't tell you the last time I've had gravy because Tara doesn't like it. So when you live with 2 people and one of the 2 people doesn't like something, you tend to just not make it.
You don't want it, because it's that's work for me, and I'm going to be the only one to enjoy it. So what's the point? But we were talking about that on Twitter, because not just you, but everyone I followed on Twitter posted their goddamn Thanksgiving spread, which is already torturous when you're
not getting one,
when you're eating frozen pizzas and you're just tired from work because you fucking people can't stop grocery shopping for 5 seconds. Just live a day of your life without going to the grocery store once, please. Put me out of a job, please.
I've actually gotten better about that, by the way, because that used to be me but I don't put more work for you because I don't have people pick my groceries. I still go do that, but so it's already I'm seeing all these people, but nobody had gravy on any of their Thanksgiving food. And to me, that's crazy. It's funny because I didn't even pick up on that, but as soon as you said it on Twitter, I'm I don't remember seeing a single plate with gravy.
Yeah. Everybody's posting their dry ass fucking bird and stuffing. And it's I'm not just put a little on the mashed potatoes. To me, it's all an excuse to have as much gravy as I want. The whole holiday is just about gravy.
You know what? That's a great idea. We need to open a pinkberry, but instead of fruit smoothies, it's just a gravy smoothie, and you pick what do you want turkey in it and stuffing, and you add in the that, and you just blend it up and drink it through a big straw.
Yeah, I cover it on fucking everything, and I was just you guys are all you're fucking up.
Tara's one of those people too. That doesn't like her foods mixing.
What the
they can touch is as long as they're not liquidy, and it's that's the best part of Thanksgiving dinner for me is how it all kind of mingles together.
Is think about all your favorite foods in the world. All the trashy food we all love. It's all food blended together.
Right.
A burger is just it layered, and then you take a bite, and it's all together. A burrito is just all that shit,
Yeah, I've tried that logic. It doesn't work with her, but yeah, Thanksgiving's and Christmas. Those two, just because they're very similar meals anyway. One of the best parts is you just pile all that shit onto one big plate, and it all mixes in, and you're getting some turkey with stuffing and gravy, and maybe some potatoes in there, and it's all one bite.
Yeah, it just turns into a fucking slop. You're like a pig eating out of a trough. But
and I guarantee I'm not the only one at the family meals that wishes that you could just forgo the formalities and just stick your face in the plate. Maybe all it takes is one person to do that, and everybody will be thank God, I've been wanting to do this too, and we can all just eat out of a trough.
Yeah, last year it was basically that. The stuff was served, but we didn't eat at the table. We all got filled up a plate and watched The Irishman.
Not the football team, just Irishmen.
Is there a football team called the Irishman?
Yes. Oh, you mean the movie?
Yeah.
I assumed you were talking about the Fighting Irish at Notre Dame or something playing. But
isn't that the Fighting Irish?
Yeah, but
that's their name. They're not the Notre Dame Irishmen.
No, but I figured you were just being colloquial, whatever. I can't say that word. But
you gave up on it.
I did. I was halfway there, and I'm like, nope.
Colloquial. Oh.
It's like me running a 5K. I can do the first 3, and then it's just like, nope. I bail out.
Here's Steve vocally die trying to say colloquially.
See? But
it's a tough one. I just stumbled it right there. So
yeah. Anyway. Yeah. I mean,
hopefully you guys had a good Thanksgiving. If you cared, if you were like me, then bravo.
I kind of hope you had a bad Thanksgiving, because that's the kind of space you need to be in to listen to the non-essential podcast. Like, if you're having a good time, you're not listening to our show.
You don't really need it.
Yeah,
but hey, we're happy to have you anyway.
Your ice cream type of podcast, but
we're more like we're having a full cup of coffee at 3 p.m. because we're that tired. That's the type of show we do.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you haven't heard the show before and you're just like, hey, I'm full of gravy, I need something to do. The show, we just tell each other stories. It's just shit we find on the internet, basically.
Yeah.
And fact fiction, we don't really make rules about it. It needs to fill half an hour. So here we are. Enjoy.
Basically, we find stuff we want to talk about, and then we talk about it. And then we just kind of hope that somebody else is like, hey, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And then it'll be like a week later, we'll be like, well, we'll take your word for it. I don't really remember what we talked about, but sure.
It's funny the topics I do and don't remember from like week to week, but
that's true. Like, we've done stories and you've been like, oh, that reminds me of like, I think it was our 5th episode. And it's like, and in my head, it's like, fuck, you remember our 5th episode?
Like, well, you know, the funny part about that, your story, you did the last story. I think it was the last one we did before we took the week off for Thanksgiving, about the, I couldn't even tell you his name, but the guy that was just basically like, yeah, religion's cool because now I can kill people. And like, I want to use it as an excuse to reclaim.
Right.
Whatever.
What it was, George Ganesh or George Ganesh or whatever.
Yeah. I won't give away the big, like the ending, because that was the best part. And if you haven't listened to the episode, you know, listen to it.
Yeah,
it's all interesting, but the ending is like it's one of those that builds and then the ending comes out of nowhere and you're like, holy shit, that's a cool story.
It's up my alley, because it's like, it's a story of like history and military and political intrigue. And then it just like veers off into like, oh, so that's how it ends.
That's how it ends. Yeah.
A very, very Fargo ending.
But yeah, that was going to be my point. Like, yours took place, or it started, or it had something to do with the Habsburg Empire. And I was like, oh yeah, that's like that army that, and I kind of looked while we were talking, and it was that I did a topic on the Habsburg army, and they're the ones that got drunk and then fired on themselves and then got scared that they were being overrun by the enemies and retreated from themselves.
Yeah.
And basically,
once you reminded me of that, I was like, oh, how this dude comes to his end is actually not that absurd when you consider the military time they were in.
Here's where I'm going with this, though. You'll love this. It's just like, over the last week, over the holiday weekend, my wife was she listens to some of these like YouTube shows. They're kind of similar to ours, where they just talk about stuff.
That's bullshit.
And I know she doesn't listen to ours, but she listens to similar shows.
No, the last time she listened to ours, she was like, "Oh, Ben has a weird voice," and I had to go to therapy for months.
Yeah. But she was listening to something, and they were talking about, it was like actually like kind of one of those like Science Now type show, whatever. But it was talking about inbreeding, and one of the big studies that they do. Guess what? It was families in Habsburg, because there was a lot of inbreeding in Habsburg, and it's like, hey, that explains both
shit.
of our. Yeah. Like, but I always tune out what she's listening to, and I'm just sitting here like playing a game or watching football or something, and I hear the word Habsburg. I'm like, hey. I know something about that place.
Just shove children out of your way to go intrude on a conversation that mentioned Habsburgs.
Yeah, I'm like that classic meme about like the guy shouting at a woman that doesn't care about what the guy's saying. But
well,
but anyway,
she'll care about the Habsburgs.
Habsburgs, yeah. So this week, it was one of those weeks. It's just, and like we were talking about before the show and during the show and after the show, I'm sure like
Always.
you can identify with work just being work.
Yeah.
But
it's the holidays and everywhere is shitty. No matter still a lot of people are out of work, and that's shitty in its own way. But if you are working, it's also hell right now. So
yeah, and it's just been like weird stuff for me. Like it has nothing to do with the holidays other than being around the holidays. But a lot of it's just like bad or inconvenient shit that's just randomly popping up.
People, but like there's a switch that just flips. Like even if you have nothing to do with like commerce, like buying and selling like items like presents and consumerism and shit. Like even if you're not in that field, like people are just weird and shitty right now.
Well, yeah, and I get because people get frustrated and stressed and this and that. But the funny thing is this year for me so far, it hasn't been the clients. It's the companies that we work with. The clients have actually been pretty cool.
Yes.
And some of these situations that the companies are bringing up are ones that I would probably lose my cool. And our customers fortunately have been relatively okay to deal with, but it's just, and that kind of stuff. So I was really worried. It was about 3:00 and we're recording 6:00 my time. So 3 hours ago, and I'm sitting here like, I don't have crap for the show, which is fine because we've got contingencies for that.
Yes.
So
the internet has given us a buffer many a time in these situations.
And I thought I was going to have to use it, but I didn't. I found something shockingly.
Well,
anyway,
now we'll put it to the test.
Yeah. And I started with, I was like, well, before I just like fall back on our fail-safe, creepypasta, which I hate saying it like that because I love those. I don't want to say that like, oh yeah, just do one of those stupid shows. I love those shows.
No, they're my favorite episodes, honestly. But I also, we got to keep it.
Yeah, we try to spread them out so we don't just turn into the creepypasta podcast. But I was like, before I go there, let me just I was looking for urban legends from Ohio. Like it's like I'll take something local to me, similar to what you did a couple weeks ago with like your Spokane ghost stories.
Spokanistan hauntings.
Yeah. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll end up with like a list of those, which is kind of our second fallback. Like it's not our like complete bailout fallback, but that's kind of our second thing is to do just like lists. And then I came across a singular story that's awesome. So that's what I'm going with.
Okay.
So just over 100 years ago, in a town near Vermillion, Ohio, there once existed an orphanage known as the Gore Orphanage at Swift's Hollow, which Gore Orphanage is already setting you up for.
And a place
it's
called
like Al
Vermillion.
Gore is how it's spelled, but yeah, Vermillion's I've always loved that name for a town, and I've never been there, but I'm familiar. I've heard of Vermillion.
Sounds like a Warhammer thing. Is that a Warhammer thing?
Yeah. I don't. Well, there's the
Vermintide. That's what I'm thinking.
Vermintide, yeah. Slipknot has a song or an album, Vermillion. I think it's a song. I can't. It's been a bit since I've listened to Slipknot.
Slipknot seem to be very obsessed with like Ohio and
Midwest. Well, they're from
Midwest.
Iowa, so
yeah. I'm willing to bet Slipknot probably has songs about all the key electoral college states.
Anyway, so one unfortunate, unforgettable day, the orphanage caught fire. The children were trapped in the blaze. Some managed to escape to the second floor and headed for the fire exit, but found the stairs were blocked by flames. Onlookers tried but failed to reach the children, and as the flames grew higher and the smoke billowed into the night sky, onlookers could only listen to the screams of over 100 children as they were burned alive. Eventually the screaming stopped, and the last of the children perished. The fire burned intensely, burning the building completely to the ground. By the time it was all said and done, all that was left was some stone foundation and the cornerstone pillars.
Why do you think like buildings are made and like every window should be a fire escape window, right?
Well, yeah, but and now in a lot of these buildings that is kind of code, or there has to be at least X amount of exits, but it's because of stories like these that came to be. So it makes you wonder, like, how was there a time in our history that we're like, well, let's not think about these situations.
Well, I mean, like, but you thought enough that there's a fire exit. So you did have an idea in your head that there would be a fire here, maybe. And then you're like, but they should have to run up the stairs. And to get to, like, you have to go to the fire exit. Like, I'm standing in my house. Well, I'm sitting in my house right now, and I think I should be able to jump out the window immediately if there's a fire, and I will.
Yeah, we say that as I'm currently sitting in a basement where the only stairs out are right next to the furnace. The only thing down here that would likely catch fire. So I can see myself being trapped in the basement. But
well, smoke rises, so you should actually get it as low as possible. Keep digging.
Escape out the sump pump. Yeah. So anyway, and keep in mind this is a urban legend we're talking about, but. So to this day, the area is said to be haunted. Visitors have reported strange lights, and of course, on cold, lonely nights, you might even hear the screams of the spirits of those poor children. So it's like it's a pretty classic, urban legend, like ghost stories start. A bad fire that people burn up in, make them children because that always makes it more tragic. I mean, honestly, obviously it does. And children ghosts are also more spooky, in my opinion, than adult ghosts. I don't know why, but they are.
I don't know. They always want to just like bounce a ball or some shit. Like,
come play with us. No, I don't like play. Wait. Yeah, that sounds better than work. Yeah. Let's go. I'll throw a ball back and forth.
Yeah, you suck at fucking basketball, guys. I hate to break it to you.
Finally, somebody I can beat. Take that, little kid. So of course. After the blaze, and since then, this would have been early 1900s, so the area is said to be haunted, which you'd think it probably would be if 100+ children burned up in a school. Fortunately, like most urban legends, this one is mostly wrong. Unfortunately, I just said mostly wrong and not totally wrong. And also, the true story might be actually worse than the urban legend.
We softened it.
Yeah.
Let's let them down light about the story where all these orphans die.
Yeah, if the true story is not worse, it's certainly not better. At least it's not going to go there. So Gore Orphanage near Vermillion, Ohio, is a real place, but it's actually was known as the Light of Hope Orphanage, which to me is it's more ominous than Gore Orphanage, because Gore Orphanage is almost too cliche for like a haunted, like terrible place. Light of Hope is the exact name you expect from a haunted, terrible place.
Like that's actually so much scarier.
But before it ever became Light of Hope, the property was home to an impressive farm, or rather, like 4 separate sets of farm buildings owned by a single farmer, and a magnificent mansion built by said farmer, who was named Joseph Swift.
Every time the farm fucking was a bust, he would build a new farm building and try again. It
was actually the opposite. He was like too successful. He had to build a farm. And it's like, shit, we're too farming. Let's start a second farm.
And now I imagine him like building up the mansion, and like he opens the door like all done, and there's just corn inside and shit. It's like, God damn it, I'm too good.
That's how it seemed to be. Like he was probably buying out other farms. And given that this was, I think early 1800s, mid 1700s, when this all kind of first founded, probably a lot of like slavery or underhanded shit involved building up this giant. Basically, it was an early corporate farm type deal. Although I didn't read any like bad things about Swift in his defense. It's just I assume that because we've covered enough history on this podcast.
Yeah, there was some dirt.
Unfortunately for the Swifts, their good fortune wouldn't last. In 1831, their 5-year-old daughter died. It sounds like a disease. Back then it's like it's tragic when your kid dies, but it also happens every Wednesday. Mortality rates weren't that great. 10 years later, though, they would lose their 24-year-old son. And again, it didn't really say to what. Could have been a farm accident, disease, whatever. Which is sad. But then I found out that their son was named He-Man, and that's awesome. Like, I even had to go as far to look up. I'm like, is that supposed to be Herman? Like, whoever's typing this, was that just a typo? No, his name was He-Man. And there was actually another, probably, or Hyman, and when he died, it was a farm accident. They're like, oh no, we broke our hymen. But nothing like a good sex organ joke.
Yeah,
anyway. So after their two kids died, Joseph also had made a number of bad investments in railway companies, and he was soon forced to sell the property. The home was sold to a Nicholas Wilbur, who, of course, was a well-known spiritualist. And if you're not really familiar with this time period, spiritualists in the mid-1800s meant, psychic. They do the seances and hold those kind of like, let's talk to ghosts. I guess it still kind of means that, but it was used more often back then.
It's what we do. If you subscribe to our Patreon, we bring in.
And so this well-known spiritualist buys this kind of secluded but giant opulent mansion in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. And so, of course, there's all sorts of rumors about the rituals and seances and stuff that often took place there. Wilbur's kids were all supposed to be psychic as well, or clairvoyant, whatever they wanted to call it. They were supposed to have the ability to talk to the ghosts of children. So you can see where this is.
Specialty.
I don't know. Why can you talk to only child ghosts? It's like you're not a pedophile. You're like a
Probably because adult ghosts won't waste their time with you.
Yeah.
It's like I got ghost work. Okay, I gotta go.
This person thinks they're psychic. I'm not talking to them. But
this guy's a fucking loony. He thinks he's psychic. He thinks he can talk to me.
So there was all sorts of this kind of like supernatural goings on or whatever in the house. Eventually, though, it was like 1901. I think they said they would end up just like abandoning the property. Basically, it sounds like they just couldn't afford to keep living there. You probably don't make opulent mansion and 4-farm type money being a glorified palm reader. So it ends up this abandoned property. And of course, an abandoned mansion that has like the first owners lost 2 children there. And then the second owner was this mystic, quickly gained a reputation and like as a place that was probably haunted, and local teens would often like sneak in and all that kind of good stuff. But that's not where this is going either, because shortly after that, it was purchased by a husband and wife. I kind of got ahead of myself here in my notes, so I'm trying to catch up. It was abandoned for a time. A husband and wife named Johann and Katharina Sprunger. So great names. Johann Sprunger.
Is it Katharina or Katarina with just a weird spelling?
No, I don't think it's just Kat, because it's Katharina. So it really looks like
I think they're just being stubborn about the H.
Maybe, because I have heard of Katarina before. I guess it could be Kat, and the H is supposed to be like the arena. So I'll go with you, because I can say Katarina. I can't say Katharina. But
I don't know why that's funny to me. The H is the arena.
Arena, yeah.
The arena.
Anyway, they were the Sprungers. They purchased the property. The Sprungers were religious zealots, relocating from a town called Bern, Indiana, which will be hilarious here in a second, because that was the home of the original Light of Hope orphanage, which burned down, killing 3 children. The 3 children part's not hilarious, but it's funny to me when your orphanage in Bern, Indiana burns to the ground. It's like, yeah.
Well, we should have saw that coming when we built it the first time. We shouldn't have put it here. So now we've learned our lesson.
And then there was also this like little footnote, as if it's a minor thing, that 2 of their other businesses in Indiana also burned to the ground. Back then, authorities were shit at putting like 2 and 2 together on anything. It's like, I swear we've done all sorts of these stories, mostly about serial killers, but it's like, man, these people's stuff keeps burning to ground. How unlucky are they? It's like, yeah. Okay.
Smart enough to do insurance, but not smart enough to see how people might abuse that.
Granted, it seems like back in the 1800s and early 1900s, buildings just lasted for about 5 days and then burned to the ground. It's like, I guess that happens when you build your houses out of old dry wood and then light them with candles. But, whatever. It's also worth noting that Johann Sprunger's wife, Katerina, was the daughter of one Christian P. Sprunger, and although there's no official explanation of why his wife's maiden name was the same as her married name, some documents later discovered at the estate refer to Johann and Katerina as brother and sister. So some final incest going on among these religious zealots who keep having their businesses burned to the ground. But they are now the owners of this property. And if you're good at deduction, you may have queued up on the theme. I skipped a paragraph. If you're good at deduction, you knew what I was going to say and knew where I'm going here. Anyway, they purchased the estate with the goal of setting up a self-sustaining religious community. One of the existing farms was used to house the male orphans, and one was used to house female orphans. And the site also featured a chapel and, of course, a printing press, which was used to print all of Light of Hope's own textbooks and whatever. Because that's what, when you're self-sustaining, you're
what
basically...
What to do if fire?
Here's where I was going with that. If you're good at deduction, you may have queued up on the theme of self-sustaining and orphans, and then you may have hastily jumped to the conclusion that these children were being used as slave labor to run the farms, and you'd be absolutely correct.
That's... Yeah, like, it was, I already knew it was bad, but you took it for a turn for, like, a real, like, oh, man, that's fucking gross.
Anytime, that's why I even bothered putting it in there. When you're described as religious zealots, you know it's not going anywhere good, but there's literally, like, one place that these type of people go, and that's exploitation of a lot of people for your own personal gain. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like kind of what was going on here. Children would occasionally escape across the nearby river, which was the Vermillion River, into the town of Vermillion. And there they'd recount the stories of the conditions at the orphanage, hard labor, no actual education, starvation, rat-infested living quarters, disease, neglect. When they would become sick, which they all would because of the conditions, they would be given no actual medical attention. They'd all be healed through prayer, of course. So basically, it's like I laughed at myself for writing this. It's the royal flush of a hellhole orphanage bingo, because you get royal flushes in bingo and not poker. But yeah, like every cliche that you picture when you like see these movies about these terrible orphanages back then, it's like, yeah, let's go ahead and check off every one of these boxes. I'd guess in their defense, the only one I didn't read about was like sexual abuse. They weren't molesting the children, so I guess that's good for them.
Well, that's time they could be working. Like, it's fucking sick.
Kids, enough kids got out of this place that eventually it would draw the attention of the state of Ohio, who would conduct an investigation into all these allegations. And for their part, the Sprungers were like, yeah, they admitted to it. They're like, yeah, that's exactly what's going on here. And in response, the state said, well, that sucks, but we don't have any laws against it, so have fun.
We really should have thought about that before we gave you control of children.
Well, or started an investigation. It's like, we're going to investigate you. Well, we were right, but there's no laws against it, so I don't know why we bothered.
Damn, if only we made, laws condemning crimes against humanity, shit.
Yeah, but that's, and I imagine it was kind of more like, we're going to investigate and make sure you're paying your taxes and all that stuff. Well, you are. You're beating children to death, but that's allowed, so
yeah,
you got us there.
But if you missed a payment, we'll be back.
But a few years after they were investigated, Mr. Sprunger died, hopefully of a horrible disease or something. It didn't really say. He just died.
Knowing my how house is blowing up, help, and that's how it ended. His last words.
Yeah. Once he was dead, the place fell under financial troubles and eventually just, shut down and was abandoned. So in reality, there was a ton of abuse, sadness, probably some deaths at the orphanage, but there was no massive loss of life as dozens and dozens of children burned alive, because that actually happened a couple towns over. Mm-hmm. So about 40 miles east of Light of Hope Orphanage in the town of Collinwood, 176 children were burned or trampled to death when the school caught fire. As students had descended the upper story, the fire alarms went off and it looked like it was a 3 or 4 story school, from the pictures. So the fire alarms went off, and as the students all rushed to the stairwells to make their escape, they got down to the first floor and found that the entire floor was engulfed in flames and they could not go out that way. But as the children at the bottom saw the flames and tried to turn and go back up, the children at the top were frantically trying to go down, which ended up pushing a bunch of kids into the fire, so that's wonderful. And a bunch more got trampled or crushed to death. The people that did survive that got back to the second floor to the rear entrance of the building, only to find the rear entrance locked. Which, again, you hear all this stuff about, how about window exits? You shouldn't ever have an exit at a school locked from the inside, you can't get out, blah, blah, blah. These are all lessons we unfortunately learned through tragedies like this. Responders did rush to unlock that door and did get it unlocked. But here's another building code that hadn't been invented yet. That door swung inwards, and with the mass of people inside trying to push their way out, nobody could open the damn door, and they all burned to death. And that says something about, we've kind of learned about that in psychology too. It's all it would take is for those enough people to say, hey, let's back up a second so the door opens. But that's not what happens when mass hysteria that's involved. Yeah. So that's the story of how 176 some children burned alive in their school 40 miles to the east of Light of Hope Orphanage. The janitor, a German immigrant named Herder, was accused of setting the fire, 100% I assume because he was an immigrant, because 4 of his own children burned alive in the blaze, and he was seriously burned himself while trying to rescue students from the school. But you know how people are, you got to pin it on somebody, and why not the foreign guy? Yeah. He was detained for a time, but they mostly actually detained him to protect him from being lynched by all the people that were sure he was the one that set the fire. Yeah. Fortunately, if you can say fortunately, the dude lost 4 kids and was seriously burned, but he was not lynched, and they did let him go. They didn't, at least the justice system didn't do that shitty ass thing where they just were like, yeah, we're going to pin this on somebody, and pinned it on him. So the Collinwood tragedy actually had nothing to do with Light of Hope Orphanage, other than that it occurred around the same time, as the orphanage was being investigated and stuff.
Fuck, we can't tell 2 fucking tragic stories. Let's just...
Well, it's interesting because the theory put forth in the article that I will have linked in the post here for this show, is that, and I kind of find this credible, is that after that tragedy in Collinwood, a lot of the families probably moved away. I know if I had a kid or multiple kids in school and just everybody did, the whole town together had all their children get killed in a single fell tragedy, a lot of people were probably look, I gotta get out of this town. It's a normal reaction to be I can't be around this place. So a lot of those people probably relocated to areas like Vermillion, Ohio, close to this orphanage. And then over the years, as the legend of the orphanage was told and the legend of the fire was told, they just kind of merged into the same story. So I kind of like that theory. How true that is, who knows? But that's where this urban legend comes from of Swift's Hollow Orphanage. So, like I said, what's so interesting to me is it starts out as this kind of cliche, you can go into the woods and find traces, because it's a park now. You find traces of foundations of some of these buildings. But it's cliche, yeah, there used to be an orphanage and children died and now it's haunted. And it's no, that didn't happen. But what really did happen is equally tragic and kind of sucks. And it's still probably not haunted, especially not by the children who died in the school, because I don't know why the ghost would travel 40 miles to haunt the woods. But anyway.
I was having an argument with somebody about this anyway. It was why would a ghost haunt this? It's it's not up to them. If you believe in the logic of ghosts, then it's there's no... You just get slapped places, and usually it's a place where something bad happened to you, but you know...
That could be true. Maybe the ghosts of the children from the fire were drawn to the tragedy from the orphanage, and that's how they ended up there.
Yeah.
I guess.
Or, everything's just a left turn away in Ohio. You know, who knows?
That's true. The kids got lost on the way home to haunt their parents for making them go to school that day and dying. Like, yeah.
They were like, well, we were trying to get back to where we died, but this seems bad enough. So,
you know, there was at least one kid that died in that fire that tried to be like, oh, I'm sick today. I don't want to go to school today, Mom. I don't feel good. And the mom's like, you're going to school. And that kid's definitely haunting somebody. He's like, I could have stayed home and watched Bob Ross in 100 years. So anyway, that's the end of my story. It was just one of those, like I said, I thought it was going to just turn into a footnote and be like one of three things, but there was enough there that actually happened. That was interesting. Yeah, it's sucky.
Like, for people who don't know, like, me and my friends have been playing this ghost hunting game called Phasmophobia. And in the game, you go into these haunted locations and you say into your mic, you ask the ghost questions to try to get a response in all these spooky rooms. And now I'm just going to ask them, like, do you watch Bob Ross? Yeah.
Can you see any happy little trees?
I was kind of proud. I did go into a bathroom and got a response when I asked the ghost, did you shit here?
Flush once for yes, flush twice for hell yes.
No, it said adult. And it was like, I was like, is this ghost telling me he's a big kid now? Like,
no, he's telling you to grow up and stop talking about shitting.
If a ghost told me to grow up, I'd feel pretty belittled. I'd be like, oh, okay.
Ooh, when are you going to grow up, Ben?
Get a real job.
Stop tweeting about shitting all the time.
Stop tweeting, period. It's made your life empty, and pretend you have friends.
Like, damn, this ghost knows me well.
This ghost is really he's really cutting me to the core here. I don't like it.
That would be way scarier. A ghost that just calls you on all the things that you're self-conscious about. Like,
yeah.
Instead of like, I'm going to kill you, it's just like, you're never going to be happy.
You're
like,
30 years old. Skateboarding's for children.
Man. Yeah, I'll be right back. I got a screenplay to write. So anyway, yeah. I'm glad instead of a creepypasta, I could tell you all about a bunch of children that died and were exploited and probably died.
And we created a new character, the very hypercritical ghost. We'll call him Gore.
Now
he just shows up to really shit on you.
Yeah, I wish we were one of those like morning radio shows that just like their bread and butter is just corny like effects and stuff. We just hire some third person to come in randomly and like
just
an ethereal voice. Yeah, yeah. But they got to do it in that woo voice, like.
It would be worth it. That's we need to start that Patreon. All the funds go to Gore, the fucking hypercritical ghost. It's just so we can pay this guy to just jump in and shit on me.
I like to think he exists in the same universe as Casper, because that's how they name ghosts there. Like Casper the friendly ghost, Gore the hypercritical ghost. Like,
you turn to snack food to solve your problems when it's just gonna cause diabetes. God damn it. Gore, fuck off.
I just wanted a Twix.
I just want a candy bar. You should have had a salad 15 times this week.
Tubbo.
Tubbo.
Yeah, that'd be the thing, is I'd go into the bathroom and like flip the light on and in like lipstick, instead of like murder, it'd just be like Tubbo.
Donate to our Patreon so I develop an eating disorder. Just from being shamed. But yeah, that was interesting. Like, I bet there's a lot of shit in Ohio that you could, like...
I came across a lizard man, so there's that.
Like, it's way better than shit we have in Washington, because Washington's almost like... The stories you get here, it almost feels like they're late to the party as far as, like, hauntings and stuff, and they're trying to get in on it.
A lot of the things that I've like come across in Washington and that area of the country is like, in fairness, a lot of it like actually dates back in ages to really cool like Native American lore, and then white people came along and fucked it up. Like, yeah.
And like our best ghost stories, make it worse. Our best ghost stories are tied directly to us fucking it up, and it's when we try to pretend like, oh, we white people have our own ghosts too. It's like it's always the worst fucking ghost stories ever. They're so boring. Usually, there's always exceptions, but I feel like in Ohio, it's just because I've never been there. I just have this image of I basically just see Sleepy Hollow. Like
pretty much, yeah. Except like Sleepy Hollow, I always picture kind of that like rural spooky area, but like there's still kind of like city. They always had like the horse-drawn carriages and the overcoats and the top hats and stuff. Ohio is just like Sleepy Hollow except barefoot farmer.
Yeah, and like a lot of fields, but like I just see like it just seems like a place where it's like you can find like woods and shit, and you'll definitely find a headless horseman if you do.
There's some cool there's actually one of the coolest places in Ohio from like a lore standpoint, and it's a real place, and then of course it's got all the ghost stories connected to it. It's Moonville, Ohio, and it's actually not far from me. It's within like easy day trip distance, but I've never been there. But it's a ghost town. It's weird to me to hear Ohio and ghost town because you picture like out west and like gold rush, but there's a lot of mining ghost towns across the country too, and that's kind of what this is. And it's one of those, like, it was a big boom and then, with the mining industry and then got abandoned. And like within the last, it was within this century, I think, but it's been completely reclaimed by nature. Like now it's just like there's miles and miles of woods, and then you come across like a train bridge and some like old buildings and stuff, or foundations or whatever. I need to check it out, but it's one of those places where it's like everybody goes. So it's like, I'm not worried about doing it, but you're technically trespassing. Like you're not supposed to go there.
Yeah.
It's a real cool place. I'll probably end up talking about it on the show one time or another, because there's a lot of stories tied to it. But yeah, Ohio's got its places. Ohio's one of those places, and that one of the things I like about it is that we've got, cities, Columbus and Cincinnati and Cleveland are all relatively good sized cities, but there's still a ton of just like forest land and wilderness too.
Yeah.
And then farms. Everybody hears Ohio and they think corn and cows, and there's plenty of that.
Yeah. And there's plenty of spooky shit to be had when there's, plenty of farms.
I mean, it's just the idea of having to farm. That's a hard life. That in and of itself is scary to me.
Well, I mean, and that's like, I need to be closer to stuff than a lot of other people who find this appealing. But like country homes and stuff, the things that are like kind of way outside of town and stuff, and there's like a lot of here in Washington, it's almost always going to be a lot of woods and stuff. But you can find places that's like just acres upon acres of fields between you and the next bit of civilization. And like, I couldn't do it, but it is like that part of my brain that loves this type of shit. It's like, that is really scary. Like, get that, like you're alone at night and it's just the fucking wild outside,
Yeah. I'll tell you the thing that, cause I kind of grew up like that. We had about 10 acres of land, so that not like a farm or anything, but enough space. Like our nearest neighbors, you could scream and they would maybe hear you if they were outside, that kind of deal. And then it was a lot of farmland around us, so it wasn't like we were in the middle of woods, but there wasn't a lot of other people around. And for the most part, it didn't bother me. If I went outside, there were times I'd go outside and just like walk to the edge of the property where there was a little bit of woods, it could get creepy, but then you get in your head and you start thinking like stupid things. Like the dumbest thing was always, I'd think about like, what if I looked out the window and like Bigfoot was standing right outside staring in at me? And then you get yourself to this like mental space where you're like, I'm just not looking at the window.
Yeah. I don't have to say that. Like, I might have told the story on the show, but it was like one of the, one of my favorite creepypastas was like, it was a really short one. And it was about this guy who's like, he was home alone. He was a kid, a teenager. And, he was just like on his computer and there was like a fucking murderer just staring at him and carving into the door, like, turn around, like, look at me.
I think you did tell that one on the show because I remember that word. Yeah.
Yeah. And like that to me is like really scary, but that's one of those things where it's like, if it happened to me, like, and I saw him like out of the corner of my eye, I definitely wouldn't turn to acknowledge him.
Yeah. You just don't.
I'm busy. Typity type.
Well, I mean, like I said, and I even do that here that we're in town, although it's still like, we're still close enough to wilderness that you get coyotes and, possums and that kind of stuff. So it's still that, but yeah, like as soon as I get it in my head that like, it's like when you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you're like, if I flip this light switch on, there's going to be a ghost behind me. I'm taking a piss in the dark. Like, just don't look and it won't be there. But like once you get into your own head, it's, at least for me, I very much get into my own head with that stuff. And it's funny because we've talked about it. It's like, I don't believe in like any of it, but that doesn't keep me from like.
But I'm not stupid. I'm not going to invite that into my life. Except I would. I totally will. Because like, that is it's annoying, especially on like times where like it's late at night and I have to work or something. But if I hear shit go bump in the night, you better believe I'm getting up to check it out. But I guess that's not totally true because like sometimes I feel like I hear something in the basement and I won't check the basement in this house.
Yeah, if I was, I don't know, it's kind of changes the dynamic a little bit when you have a kid too. It depends on what the noise was. But yeah, the basement's one of those things. Like I said, I'm down in our basement right now. We don't have a creepy basement by any means, but every basement has a level of creepiness to it. But yeah, if I was upstairs at night and Lincoln was in bed and it didn't sound like somebody breaking in or like there might be a burglar inside, if I heard like something downstairs that was weird, I probably wouldn't check it out. Yeah. Unless I thought it was like my furnace going bad or something like that.
It was like, Tara, they just want the TV. Just leave it alone. Yeah.
Did I ever tell you though about, I don't know if I did. We had first moved, we'd only been living in this house for about 2 or 3 weeks. And I was home. I can't remember if I was home alone. I think I was home alone. I think Tara and Lincoln went up to visit her family or something. I might have had Lincoln with me and she was asleep. I can't remember. But I was sitting on our couch in our living room and the stairs to our basement's kind of right next to the couch. It's just a couple feet over. But our stairs to the upstairs kind of run above the stairs to the basement. Like you couldn't necessarily tell it by seeing it, but it's kind of stacked. And I was sitting at home watching TV and my back's kind of to the basement door. And all of a sudden I hear footsteps on the stairs and it starts off kind of slow, like thump, thump, thump. And then it starts to kind of pick up speed a little bit and it sounds like it's coming up the stairs and there's only X amount of stairs too. So as you're kind of counting them off in your head, I don't know how many stairs there are, but you're like, it's almost at the top of the stairs, but I'm like, what the fuck is coming up? But it's exactly what you just said. I'm like, there's somebody walking up my stairs. I know nobody else is here. I'm not turning to open the door and look like if I don't look, it's like
confront this.
Right. And then as it gets to the point where like you're about to just pass out of terror because you know it's at the door, I hear my dog's feet on the floor. It was actually my dog coming down the steps above it, but the way she was thudding and the fact that I have like hearing loss on one side and you can't like pinpoint sounds that well, like I was 100% sure somebody was walking up my steps. And then the dog comes down. I'm like, holy shit, that was terrifying.
That is like the best though. It's like you're gearing up a little bit. Like even when you're, a chicken shit like we are, it's like,
I was 100% prepared for that to be the moment that I suddenly am 100% sure that ghosts exist. Like, I was like, this is it. This fucking house is haunted, and I'm about to see the door. Like, I didn't think I was going to get, like, killed by a ghost or something, but I was convinced the door was about to fling open, and then I've seen enough ghost stories to be like, and then nothing was there, or there was a shadowy figure, and then it disappeared. And it's like,
and then I either have to one deal of those with this scenarios, every night for
because once that happens once, you're like, it's something's here. The chances of it happening again are greater than like zero. Like, so that was my funny story, because it was terrifying, but it was still it's terrifying, but I'm not the scream and run type. I'm the sit there and deny it's happening type. So if you want to murder me, I'm a very easy target, because you'll come busting in with an axe and I'll be like, nope.
That's what I mean. Is like, when talking about that story, I would just sit there and pretend I don't see you. And then, like, even when you, like, I don't have a choice but to see you, I would just sort of stare at you and like hope, like, well, maybe I'm the ghost and maybe he can't see me and maybe I'll be okay. And that's my last thought as the axe goes up and comes down.
That's a great alternative to the Sixth Sense, where you see the ghost and then realize that you're actually the ghost. But the way you realize that is the ghost you see, instead of being like, boo, the ghost all of a sudden is like, holy shit, and takes off running. Like,
that would be a good movie. That should have been the sequel. That should have been the Seventh Sense.
Or just the ending to that movie. Like, instead of him, like, quietly and reflectively realizing he's a ghost, somebody should have pissed their pants when they saw him.
Yeah. Or just like but I mean, like, the way that movie should have gone is like, every ghost he thought this kid was fucking with, those were the real people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like the whole time it's like, you think like, oh God, these are demonic spirits. But it turns out it was you, motherfucker. You are the bad one. I don't know why I assume all ghosts are bad. Probably that video game.
Well, because they are. Because if they're a good ghost, they leave you alone and you never see them.
Well, they fucking kill me every time we play that game, so...
I don't think, especially like I said with there's two things against me with that game. Is it's a PC game, so I'd have to be in the basement, which, like I said, it's not a creepy basement, but all basements are creepy.
Yeah, and you gotta set the tone, and
it's cold, and anytime it's cold, there's something about being cold. Because, well, I know what it is. Not something about it. It's because one of the things that's supposedly about ghosts is that you feel cold when they're in the room.
Yeah.
So that adds to the creepy. But the biggest killer for me would be that I don't have speakers for my computer. And you probably, a lot of people anymore, this is true, but I use headphones.
Yeah,
but
you should.
Scary things are way the fuck scarier when you're wearing headphones.
Yeah, but you absolutely should wear headphones with it. But my one thing is, like, if you played that game, given the fact that you are in a cold basement, for a house that, now that you've told me that story, it may or may not be haunted.
There's other things that
you are,
like I've said a minute ago, I don't believe in ghosts, but I'm open-minded. Yeah. The other day I was down here playing guitar, and I swear I saw like the shape of a figure out of the corner of my eye. But then when I turned to look, there's like a sheet kind of hanging from our clothes rack thing, and I was like, yeah, it was probably that. Yeah, I forget the pareidolia, I think is the term, where you make human or face. You recognize shapes that are similar. So I think it was that, but I also, there was like an element of movement, I thought.
Yeah. So I genuinely believe if you played that game with us, you would summon a spirit into your life.
How crazy would that be if you were playing a game about being haunted while actually being haunted?
You get to compare how good the developers did. No,
and I don't mean like one of those corny teenage movies where like the game haunts you. I mean, like, it's completely unrelated. You happen to be being haunted while playing a game about being haunted.
Yeah, it's a really it's a janky fucking game, but it's really fun.
Yeah, the little bit when you mentioned it, I kind of looked it up and I'm like, yep, I don't think I could handle that.
It's tough. It's tough shit to handle for sure.
The only thing that would help,
and they keep adding maps, so like they made an old abandoned high school, which sucks, and we haven't played them yet, but we're probably going to at some point this weekend. They made one that's like a prison, and that's got to be terrible. Like all of them suck, but it's like
the thing about schools and prisons are there's so many little nooks, like each cell or room that there's, because as the thing about horror, we talked about it. It's more it's less the thing and it's the anticipation of the thing.
Yeah.
And so when every cell that you pass, you're expecting, well, something might jump out at me. Like that never, yeah.
Yeah. But setting is really important for a horror game. And I feel like prison and school are the two places in my entire life I never wanted to be. So those are really effective maps when you add supernatural forces to them. So yeah, this whole show, I guess, is brought to you by Phasmophobia.
I was going to say, I thought you mentioned it already, but we might as well plug the game since we're talking about it. But
yeah, really, really fun game. If you got some people to play with, you should give it a whirl.
Make sure you put your mouse on top of a Ouija board while you're playing, though. There
are Ouija boards in the game too. If you find one in the house, you can like use it to do some dirt.
Ouija boards only invite more trouble, though.
You're right, but your whole goal in that game is to like draw out this activity to piece together what type of ghost you're dealing with, and like you're a detective, and you're trying to get enough evidence to determine what the ghost is, and you need to push it, and if you go too far, you die, and that's tricky because the ghost is like constantly in this like loop of like sometimes they'll just fuck with you, but sometimes they're actively hunting you. Now we're just doing our old video game podcast, I realize. But it's a great game, and ghosts are fun, and fuck Christmas. Halloween's the best.
Go find a place where a bunch of people burn to death and get yourself a ghost this Christmas.
Yeah.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Give yourself a spooky time this holiday season by burning a church. All right, yeah. We'll be back next week. Bye.
See ya.